So our next panel is focusing on the relationship between parent involvement and advocacy. And so leading this discussion are parents from two local advocacy groups. We have Maggie Gunnarsson from Sycamore School's parent group GEAR, and Alyssa Luigi, sorry Alyssa if I got that wrong, but from Lakota Leads. And then facilitating the discussion is going to be Lauren Webb, who is the Assistant Director at Lakota Local Schools. So welcome Maggie, Alyssa, and Lauren. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, it's great to be here.
Yes, definitely. I'm gonna try to get all tech savvy here and get a screen share going so that we have something other than our faces to look at. All right. I'm hoping, yep, here we go. So we wanted to say thanks for joining us. We're so excited to be here with you. We just threw up a poll because we want to be responsive just to what grade bands we have here. Maybe there's some specific things we can address by just knowing a little bit more about where we're all at in our parenting and education with gifted kiddos. So I'll give you guys just a second longer to perfect. Getting some of that feedback is really helpful. The other part we want to also encourage is to use the chat. If there is something specific that you are wanting to get out of today, or some specific questions you have, at the end, we'll invite you to ask questions. But if there's something that you would like to get out of this conversation, specifically because we have some parent advocacy groups on with us, please feel free to use the chat and we'll try to monitor that as well. Well, it looks like 3, 6, and 7, 12 are our heavy hitters today, and we have some in all of them, so that's helpful to know. So I can share those results. There you go, just so everybody can see. Awesome. All right. Well, we wanted to, whoops, too far. Introduce ourselves and let you get to know us just a little bit better. So I'm Lauren Webb. I work for Lakota Schools. With me today, as you know, is Alyssa Luigi from Leeds, which is in our Lakota district. And then Maggie, who is president of Sycamore GEAR, which is in the Sycamore School District. So we're all sort of Cincinnati-ish, if for those of you who are maybe Northern Ohio, give you a little bit of geography there. So we wanted to provide a little bit of insight into our connections with gifted education. And now my dog decides it's a good time to bark, sorry. If you don't mind, Maggie, will you start just your kind of personal connections with giftedness and gifted education?
Sure. So when I was identified as gifted growing up, and so definitely had that experience in the Florida. And then, but really got into it as my son hit the 3rd grade and was identified as gifted. But then he was also having a lot of troubles because he's a twice exceptional child. He and I are both dyslexic. He also struggles with ADHD. And so I started getting into a lot of research about gifted and things like that. And then Sycamore GEAR is one of the things that came along in the process of having, learned a lot of things and shared with people that somebody said, hey, this would be a good thing for you to do.
Thanks. And then Alyssa, do you mind sharing yours?
Sure. I am the parent of officially 2 gifted kids, one who is identified superior cognitively gifted, and one who's gifted in the area of English. And probably I would suspect she's also gifted in the areas of art, but those are very difficult areas to test in and not ones that most districts do. And so that's how I am. I'm also the sister of a pretty highly gifted adult individual, which, have grown up with, with the challenges of being a sibling of a gifted kid, things like that. So.
And then my own personal, I have been in education just under 20 years. The last 7 of them have been spent in gifted education, and I'm incredibly grateful for that opportunity to become a GIS and then, furthering some of that with a district level. But I didn't know going into it that I would also need to leverage this understanding as a parent. So now I am dual role, which it's really helpful. I don't think I would be nearly as understanding or helpful with my own kid if I didn't know some of these quirks, if you will. We have some kind of anxiety around going to school or not getting things exactly perfect. And because of understanding our gifted learners as a teacher, that also helps me at home with her. So thankful to have had the role in gifted education at Lakota, but then now it's wonderful because I can apply it all personally too. So, well, that we hope gives you a little insight to us personally. So what we'd like to do is share just at like 100-foot level view of what parent advocacy groups look like. So they're very different. Alyssa and Maggie's two groups do kind of the same mission, but they do it in different ways. And so we wanted to share just kind of 100-foot overview of what those look like in our communities here. So Alyssa, if you don't mind just sharing a little bit about what these looks like, and if you don't mind kind of how you got involved with it. And then Maggie, I'll bother you with the same question.
Sure. Leads has been around, I don't know, I've been involved with it for about, gosh, pushing 10 years now, I think. And it's been around a little while longer than that. We actually got our start with Leads down at the Super Saturday program here in Cincinnati, which is kind of a enrichment program for gifted kids. And a bunch of parents were down there and all figured out they were from the same district and kind of started talking to each other. And from there, Leads was born. And I think we talk later about all the things that we do, but how I got involved with it is, you know, you're friends with people and they twist your arm a little bit. But my first experience with Leads, honestly, was trying to sort out what gifted identification meant for my oldest child. She was identified gifted the year that our district had all of our gifted services cut because of levy failures, as I'm sure many districts out there in Ohio have experienced the joys of levies in that cycle. And so just trying to figure out what this meant. Like, she got a 95 in this, but then her score in this other thing was different, and I don't understand what all this means. And so meeting and kind of asked some questions. And then when I stepped down from being a president of a PTO, somebody wrote me into being president of Leads.
So mine's somewhat similar. So again, started doing a lot of research when my son was in the 3rd grade, trying to figure out, you know, what had made this incredible shift in him, from being kind of joyous about school to really doing school avoidance, and things like that, and going, you know, what has happened here. I also kind of started the Super Saturday organization because enrolled him in some classes due to his gifted teacher saying, go, you know, check this out. And it was this wonderful experience. It was it's good. The parent part of the program, or the caregiver part of the program, is free, and it's the cheapest, best therapy I've ever had. And went, oh my gosh, there's so much here to learn and to understand. And that was the start of it. And that started me on my journey with my son. And then I was like, no, I've really got to share this with other people. And as I kind of thankfully started getting, you know, the support that I needed for him, opened up other opportunities to then work within my district with the GEAR organization. And they're like, oh yeah, this is all kind of stuff that we need. Because as much as there are lots of different levels that you can connect with people, whether you're a choice exceptional or profoundly gifted or all those kinds of things. But even at the school level, there's a lot of differences. The state puts on some guardrails, but your local district does a lot of the controlling of that. And it's not necessarily easy to navigate. It's hard to understand exactly what everything's going on. So I was happy to, I've only been in part of GEAR for the last 2 years, but my journey has been longer than that. And GEAR's been around for a long time. It's at least 20 years old. I could find documents that went back that far. But I think that's a really good message for this group, is that there isn't an origin story. There isn't like a, you know, here we, you know, officially start and did this thing. My understanding is that it started with a parent who was similarly advocating for their child and kind of got other people involved, and it just kind of grew organically from there. And then about at least in 2006 is when the district started like really recognizing GEAR as, you know, a partner, basically, because we are independent of the school district as an advocacy group, but they do recognize us and they meet with us, either meet every third or every quarter of the year, which is fantastic. So, you know, don't, just because these other organizations may have been around a long time, it just really kind of starts with you getting together with people.
Thank you. And I will share with the audience that having done some practice runs with these two has personally been really helpful and understanding, you know, district level things, but then also our own personal kids and like just being able to share that. So within just this very small circle of the three of us talking has really been helpful. So even if you start small, and we'll talk a little bit about that later, but even if you start small, just find someone else to chat with, it really does help. So I think I jumped it a little bit with asking the question about your personal connections with it. So we kind of melded all those together. So we wanted to spend probably the most amount of time today talking more about, and I have to swing our little video guys kind of over here into the middle so we can see. So the supports that Leads and Gears provide, while it may take a while to be established and be able to get to these points, I think that what Gear and Leads provide to the communities is the most important aspect. So we'd love to spend a little bit of time just digging into some of the key events, resources, those types of things that you both provide. So Alyssa, if you don't mind sharing, I know there's quite a few laundry lists, but some of the big ones, you know, our favorite is Pi Day. So, you know, a few of those enrichment, like the science fair, like some of those pieces, just so that parents understand what, if you can collectively get together, how powerful that can be. So thanks, Alyssa, for getting us started on that one.
Sure. Yeah, Leads has done a lot over the years, and honestly, what things we do and what we provide morphs over time. There's some things that we did in the past that honestly, here we are kind of post-pandemic and they haven't picked back up and things like that. And the biggest thing I want to say is you can provide what you can provide. And so don't feel like you have to provide some certain amount of things in order to be successful. If all you can do is one or two things, then that's it. I mean, right now, we have something we did before. We don't have anybody to lead it right now, so we're not doing it. Probably one of our biggest things that we do is Pi Day or Pi Night. It happens close to 3/14, not always on 3/14. We do it on a Friday. That's close to 3/14 whenever we can get access into our high school. That's not conflicting with all the other things that's going on. But it's a hands-on math and science night that is predominantly geared for grades K through 8. And we have local providers, local vendors that come in and provide hands-on activities. We have a lot of our local elementary schools put together like a table with an activity. We have outside vendors, all things like that. They have to be willing to provide the activities for free. Like we don't charge them, but we also don't, you know, they aren't allowed to like charge anything to come or anything like that. And it's a fun evening. It's a big kind of undertaking, but it's gradually grown over the years. So it's not like it has to be this big thing. And we do have a good group of volunteers that kind of work with that. We provide a science fair that just started. I think the first one was like right before the pandemic kicked off was our first time doing like a science fair, but this is now I think the third year that we've done it. We had students go to state last year, and that was fun. We usually have a kickoff in the fall, a picnic or something like that. This year we've partnered with actually with the district gifted services to do kind of a game night, and we're going to have some information about Leads there. We provide different parent presentations from different organizations or individuals that we know that just might have information that's beneficial to parents. How do I deal with this kid that is super smart, but at the same time seems like they can't manage some basic things, that executive functioning, all of those kinds of things. And then we support destination imagination in our district. That was kind of supported by or started by another parent, but we provide some financial support to them, helping with some registration fees. And then we also provide what's called the Right Challenge. And this is kind of interesting. This was something that was actually originally offered by Lakota as a district event. And when the levies failed and that kind of things, they kind of came to us and asked if we would take it over. So it's a writing challenge that is open for grades K through 12. They can write a poem, an essay, or a narrative. And then we have guest judges, and there's kind of grade bands, but that's something that we now partner kind of in conjunction with the district and kind of work together on how that works. So that's kind of a unique thing that we've done. But again, what we offer, we used to offer a book club. That's what I was talking about. We used to offer a book club pre-pandemic. We don't have anybody to lead book club right now. So we're not doing book club right now. And that's the reality. So.
Well, if you are anywhere near Butler County, March 1st, is that all right, Alyssa, for Pie Night? So
March 3rd.
Thank you.
At Lakota West.
It's coming back. We haven't had it in a couple of years because of COVID. So please mark that on your calendar and join us, because it's a fantastic night. And my kid will always remember that she got to touch a brain, like a real brain. So there you go. Maggie, do you mind sharing just a little bit about what enrichment opportunities, those kinds of things that Gear provides for the?
Yeah, absolutely. So, at the start of the year, we do a trivia night just kind of for fun, typically. But then one of the things that we've really branched into is our district has a lot of, they're called the ambassador program. So anyone that's new to the district or anyone that's coming in from internationally, we're just kind of telling the parents what Gifted is, what the services are in the district, and really being a key force in that kind of information conduit. And then also, as mandatory testing comes out, what is this? Why would I take a COGAT test? Those kinds of things, so that parents are knowledgeable about what these things are. Also trying to be a voice for gifted kids, because there's often a prevailing, oh, they're gifted, they're fine, they don't really have any particular special needs, for people who don't know kind of the gifted intensities. A lot of people have a struggle to understand the asynchronous development of gifted kids, because they can do these really amazing things, and that's the part of them that's gifted, but the rest of them could be on average or even below average. And so, trying to be advocating for those kids. Again, we do meet with the district on kind of a quarterly basis, and that's the time that we kind of use state data to get things together to say, hey, recently one of the things that we've done is we said we used to have a part-time gifted coordinator, but with the size and the density of gifted students, it's really appropriate for us, Sycamore, to have a full-time gifted coordinator. And we were thrilled that the district said, yep, we agree with you. And so we're, for the first time in Sycamore ever, have a full-time gifted coordinator. So we do that kind of advocacy as well. So super excited about that. Someone who can be the voice at the table, who's singularly focused on gifted kids, not to say that it excludes other kids, but it's just their learning needs are different, they are unique. And so that needs to be incorporated into the larger picture to make sure that when district decisions are being made, those kids have a voice at the table. So we do things like that. We also do connect, not only between parents, which is awesome, but then students as well. There's student-to-student forums. So like when kids go from junior high to high school, and they've got a lot more school options, and what classes do I take and at what level? And every year, it's hilarious. Every year they're like, and I was listening for a past couple of years, they're like, take a study hall, just do it. Don't shove another class in there. You need the time. So we do all those kinds of things. And again, they evolve as well. We had book clubs as well, and they, right now aren't happening either. So it does kind of ebb and flow. Sometimes the organization is more social, sometimes it's more advocacy as things need to happen. So it just depends on those kinds of things. But it's a really, in the process of getting together with this group of adults to talk about, why are we advocating for a gifted coordinator? It has been a fabulous, just kind of connection with other parents to say, these are really, make sure I'm looking at gifted holistically. What have their experiences been? It's been really fascinating and a wonderful community to be part of.
Thank you both. I know it is incredibly helpful too with communication. I know that is something districts struggle with, newsletters and how do you get that word out? And we know that the best way to communicate is just by word of mouth, right? And so one of the great benefits on top of all the things that the ladies mentioned is the ability to communicate with them, and then, back and forth even. But specifically to our parent groups of, they didn't know about Destination Imagination. How do we get them to know that? And being able to use both as a conduit for information is super helpful too. All right, so the next piece is really just digging into advocacy a little bit more. But what we'd like to know, see if I can, well, how about this? Since I can't figure that part out, but we would love to know in the chat if your district is more urban, suburban, rural, because some of our advice we might provide on connecting for resources will be dependent on what that answer is. So if in the chat you don't mind just kind of throwing that in, and as we talk about advocacy, I want you to understand that it's kind of twofold. There's that group advocacy. Oh, yay, perfect, thanks. Hopefully everybody can see the, yay.
Figured it out, Lauren.
Thank you. That's so exciting. Okay, so Maggie, Alyssa, and I talked about specifically at a group advocacy level, it will look really different depending on where you are. We're really fortunate to have some powerful voices in this area, which is why gear leads, have these roles. So, but not everywhere has that. If you're more rural, which there's quite a few on here, we wanted to share that. I'm gonna go ahead and hit end poll, and then hopefully I can show you the results so everybody can kind of see. Suburban is what we thought mostly, so that's really kind of Lakota, Sycamore. That's how we would identify as well. And what's nice is you probably have some parents already connecting. Urban is a little bit trickier because it could be an educational service center, or the district is really large. Usually our urbans have really large districts, and then they just use gifted schools. But not everybody gets to get into the gifted schools, so that can be tricky. And then rural was the one we definitely wanted to share, that the educational service centers are really helpful. So if you are a rural district and you're not sure how to get started, check your local or your county's educational service center and see if they provide something. That's a great start. To dig into sort of a different avenue for advocacy, we wanted to discuss individual advocacy too. While these group level is really helpful, the advisory council, gear leads is really great. It also takes individual advocacy too. And so I wanted to share as a parent, but then also as a district education service provider, it is really important that you as a parent can step in and advocate for your kid, or at the classroom level or the district level. And, being able to do that helps provide what like the gifted normal is. So gifted is not always going to look the same in every classroom. Maggie and I like to joke around about like the gifted kid in math is still gifted in gym, but it's a different class. So we need to make sure that that whole continuum of their day is supportive for the gifted learners, especially for some of those asynchronous pieces. Our 2E, our profoundly gifted students sometimes have different challenges. And so that individual advocacy where you are, advocating for your kid or teaching them how to advocate for themselves within the classroom or within that building or district level is really important too. I know that at the, trying to get it to switch, it's stuck. All right, well, we'll just go down here. The other avenues with advocacy being, either personal or in a group level, Alyssa and Maggie had some own connections. And I know Maggie, like the parent council, if you want to talk a little bit about that. Alyssa, a little bit about like that intensities and perfectionism pieces that if you're advocating, help improve that experience for the kids. So if you two don't mind, we can start with you, Maggie, just, the pulled apart view of what advocacy can do, and some of the things maybe, if you don't mind personally sharing, that you've had to advocate for.
Absolutely. So my son having dyslexia, when I was in Florida growing up, I could be gifted or I could be learning disabled, but I couldn't be both at the time. And that's not, unfortunately, I found that with my son, I figured that would have evolved and changed because obviously I exist. But unfortunately, it doesn't as much as you might think. So if you are a parent with a kid is really bright, but is also really struggling, that's real. And not all teachers will understand that and be able to kind of cope with that. And so I really had to push for my son. And especially with dyslexia, the longer you let it go, gifted kids can sometimes the giftedness can completely mask the disability. Sometimes the giftedness and the disability kind of cancel each other out. So your kid looks average, but they're really coming home. They're really miserable at school and they're really struggling. And they're not getting the supports that they need. And sometimes the disability can mask the giftedness, that you have this really maybe creative child or whatever that really needs those kinds of unique educational experiences, but no one would necessarily see them for those because of the disability. And so to get my son the supports that he needed, it was just this kind of, pulling apart of making sure that I really understood where all these pieces were coming from. Learning about, the neurodivergence of him and then of myself. Like I also did Sing is another great organization that does social emotional education. And it was just all these things I never knew about myself. It was this awesome experience to go through and go like, oh, this is why I felt this way, or this is how these interactions have been maybe challenging for me. And socially, I never truly felt like, it wasn't until grad school that I found my real niche of people. And so you go through all these things to kind of figure that out. And then, so, doing a lot of advocacy so that he does get the services and supports that he needs for his disability, but also is in you had to advocate him to get into the highest level of math, which he's just, I was terrified to push him that hard, but then he's thrived there. And so it is possible. He went from a really dark place at school, going like, this is not working out for me. Asking to be homeschooled and things like that, which is a great option if that works for you. But I really wanted him to, kind of have him have some of the opportunities that are unique to being, he plays the trombone. I can't do that for him at all. And so, but was really able to get him to a really good place. And so it's been a long advocacy journey, but there's a light at the end of that tunnel for anybody that's out there.
All righty. Sorry, I am trying to do two things here. So I just wanted to talk a little bit, I guess my kind of other area of experience is in kind of as it connects to mental health and what those I don't know how to describe it. When you're have a lot of brain power in the cognitive ability, but you also sometimes have a lot of brain power in those other emotional areas too, and aren't sure how to regulate that as well, whatever that looks like. I don't know that there's a lot of actual studies out there of links between mental wellness and gifted kids. I wish there was more of it, because I think there's a lot of interesting atypical things out there between the two. One of the most common is that whole perfectionism piece and the anxiety that comes along with having to, or the idea that the student feels they have to be perfect, or fear of failure, things like that. I know both of my girls have that to a certain extent. My senior especially, as we're looking into colleges and all of those kinds of things, it's a challenging time, but it's definitely something we've been dealing with for all the way back to elementary school, and have been in counseling for anxiety, been on meds for anxiety to varying degrees of success. And it's something that she's probably going to struggle with for most of her life. I can tell you that my sister, who is gifted, struggles with anxiety, and she's in her 40s. So, but just that there's a lot of that asynchronous development that you'll hear us kind of talk about, the idea that just because they're they're above typical or above normal in one area doesn't necessarily mean that they're above typical in all areas. It's very challenging when you have a kid who can read and converse with adults, but yet still emotionally is a child. And sometimes the expectations are that because they can read and converse in things with adults, that therefore they are an adult and should behave like an adult all the time. And they generally don't. Was there something else I was supposed to?
No, it's good. I think when we talk about advocating, it's really about the importance of connection. Like I alluded to earlier, being able to connect with the both of you just on a different level as we were preparing for this was really helpful as a mom, but then also with my job is really beneficial for me. So we want to say advocacy can look like a lot of things, but we really want to drive home that connecting with someone else, and especially having your own kiddo connect with someone, particularly that is like them. That likability peer piece is nice because they can challenge each other, they understand each other. And I know the both of you hear me when I say the questions that they ask sometimes if you're not around a neurodiverse kid, that it's kind of like or the things that they worry about, right? So anytime you can connect either with parents that understand some of the challenges, or even having your own kids connect with other kiddos is going to be helpful and make them happier, healthier. I think the one key that we maybe don't give enough space to as parents and educators is that kiddos who are gifted, those messages in their brain fire so much faster. And so there is so much more going on in their brains than we can even see on their outside. And so just providing them some space to express that, or helping them learn how to, is also going to help them be happier and healthier long-term. And again, you can do that by connecting with other parents who have kiddos like that, or even having your kid connect with some, like at Super Saturday or Pie Night, right? So, just giving them some avenues to connect with other kiddos, and that builds that sense of belonging, which again helps with mental wellness. So
Absolutely. Like my son, we just started Super Saturday again yesterday, and we're sitting there between classes eating lunch, and this random little kid comes up to my son and tells him it's like this totally gifted joke. And I was just like, this is perfect. This is exactly why we do these kinds of things, so these kids can connect and have a space that they can explore their sense of humor, because that's often unique and quirky. And then also a place where kids, who can connect with other kids. You might have a profoundly gifted kid who just has never really been this is all easy, and they don't really understand other kids that struggle with it maybe. And so having those group of kids that they can really relate to and find other ways to challenge themselves is fantastic. So yeah, thank you.
The last connection I want to make here before we move on, as we're starting to kind of close out, but what Dr. Plucker was talking about with creativity, that's the other piece of advocacy to me too, as a parent, but then also as a district, person. Like we don't necessarily advocate. We advocate pretty well for things in the classroom, like, grades or homework, or, using your planner or executive functioning pieces. I think we've gotten pretty good at that. But one that we could really grow is that what creative looks like. How can we challenge our kids, all kids, but especially gifted kids, to kind of further that creativity piece? I know from teaching junior high and having my 8-year-old that we define a lot of things so that they know exactly what the success criteria are. but then they are scared to ever venture out of that. So that creative space is not really there for them. So anytime we can advocate to have more of that for our kids, whether that looks like recess or, different art opportunities, again, like to go back to like Kai Night and Super Saturday, I feel like those are options that help push that creativity that Dr. Plucker was talking about. So I really enjoyed him listening, and I'm going to say it is kids' fault that I'm not as creative as I could be. I love that part. So we didn't want to make this feel daunting or overwhelming, but we wanted to give you just like a couple of key small starts. Like if you don't have a local parent group, we want to give you just like some really small things that you could begin with. So Alyssa, do you mind just giving us like one or two like small starts that we could try?
Sure. And the reality is, even those of us who have established groups, especially now post-pandemic and trying to restart things in person, we're running into similar kinds of things as people getting off the ground, in that we haven't had a Pi Day in 3 years. So, we need to get a new group of people and things like that. So even established groups kind of are maybe starting a little bit from ground zero here. So we talked about trying to have an event or something like that, just a single event to try to bring people in, maybe use an outside resource, like if you have a magician or an animal critter, like we're in Cincinnati, we have this guy, the Cool Critters guy, and he brings these animals that he's rescued or been given, things like that. And or we have a parent who owns a investigative science company called Scientific Mayhem, and we've had her come and shoot rockets at the park or something like that. But just a little draw. And then we've done something where like parents you bring a meal for your kid and we provide the desserts or something like that. And just to kind of start facilitating those connections and those things like that. And then another option, this is kind of a little bit on the other end of the spectrum, but here in Lakota, we just had a parent group kind of just get off the ground this past year that is more focused on the special needs disability spectrum. And they actually launched predominantly on Facebook to start with, as a Facebook group, and invited people to connect through that Facebook group, and then launch some in-person things after first creating this virtual platform on Facebook. So that's another kind of option to get started.
And it can also be, there can be need-based. If all of a sudden your district has had to cut services and things like that, those are great ways to kind of, there's lots of different ways to start that seed. But as soon as you make those connections and start hearing my concerns are not isolated, they are part of a larger thing, that's really great. That's a great service that you're giving to your district, to say this is a kind of a global concern, not just an individual parent concern. So really working within the parents to kind of go, or the caregivers to go, what are the needs here, to then bring kind of a more unified message to the school, and how can we actually work together? What is the district up against that is causing these, and how can we advocate for the district as well as our gifted intervention specialists or gifted service providers? What are they working against too? So there's lots of different things if there's a concern to do it. But one of the pieces of advice I got very early on is find someone that's a couple of years ahead of you in this process, and figure out what their experience has been. And these groups are fabulous for finding that person, because I will tell I heard the Latin program is great. And so I said, hey, Gavin, you should try Latin. And he's into it and he's thrilled. So those kinds of things are really, really valuable on a personal level.
So I wanted to share at a district level. So like the very first spot that I would start, if you don't have somebody that you're already connected with locally, is someone has to be at your district level responsible for reporting the gifted data. So that could be, like, I am a GIS, but I also am an admin, so I have both. That could be somebody like me. Or it could be hidden under things like student services, special services. It could even just be gifted education. So if you don't know who that person is, I highly recommend just digging into your district website and looking. And if you can't find it, then email like the head of student services or special services, because that's who will have the answer for you. And then from there, just to start the relationship, ask a couple of questions. I will say from a career end, it is extremely helpful to get the feedback from Alyssa, even Maggie, and understanding where those like big needs occur and being able to, it takes time, as Alyssa can tell you, to try to meet some of those. At the third grade level, having a third grader right now, and I know quite a few of our parents in that 3-6 grade band, I didn't understand it because I was always junior high as a teacher. But that 3-6 is really where the rubber meets the road. Like, we have to try to put resources there, because if we can provide the challenges early, they're more successful later on. We get the more creative pieces. And then at 9-12, like having that student go, take a study hall. You don't need 5 APs your junior year, right? Like, just having some connection with that is going to help, drive those decisions and then understand those needs. So I highly recommend starting at the district level if you can. If you're rural, they still have to have somebody that submits all that data to the state. But the service center a lot of times is a part of that. So the ESC can help. So I would recommend going, if you have a relationship with your building administrator, like the high school principal or the 3-6 principal, asking them, because they'll know. And if not, then check out the ESC, because they will have a wealth of resources. They know a lot, and actually our rural districts ESCs know a lot about all of the districts because they're trying to support all of them. So that would be exactly the first place I would start if you weren't sure where to get going. So
also, one more quick thing. OAGC also has resources, and Gear gets our nonprofit status through them, which is awesome. It's a great savings having other organizations that don't do that. So as you get formal and you want to be an official thing and kind of like dues and stuff, reach out to OAGC because they are a great resource as well.
I know Leeds is too, OAGC affiliate. And then like Sarah was talking about,
benefit.
Yeah.
From the legal tax side of things, huge benefit to be able to partner with OAGC and not have to file your own 501c3, your own stuff, people. It's huge.
Well, we would love for you to start jumping in the chat if you have questions, things that we could directly relate for you or connect. We definitely want to do that. So we invite you now to go ahead and get some questions fired up and ready to go. As we kind of close out, we wanted to make sure that we shared some of our social media, our emails. If you have questions in the future, we would love to help. I want to say, as a district level, partnerships with groups like Leeds and Gear are critical in providing the best education possible for our kids. If your district doesn't have a group, you can still partnership with your district rep. I highly recommend it. Public schools can only be that successful and flourish when both community and district works together and supports each other. So I know that this conversation has been really beneficial as dual parent and as my job goes, but I hope that you find some more connections today. And even if that's us, we will try to help you connect to resources in your area. So do we have questions? I guess I can stop sharing so we can see some of those.
I did want to just do a quick shout out also. If you do have a Choice Exceptional child, Ohio has really a great Choice Exceptional student guide. It's a substantial thing, giving lots of examples. And so it's really those kinds of things that the state gives so much guidance, and finding out about those and bringing that to your school level to other teachers can be very useful as well. So if you have a 2E kid, that's really something good to look into. But yeah, so those kinds of things.
I see a question. This is actually a really good one. What strategies do you have for including parents of typically under identified populations in your advocacy groups? I don't know that I have the right answer for this, but I think it's a really good question. I know that we try to connect through other things like game night. So we try to connect with our families and bringing leads with us. So we'll have a district event that we kind of co-host with leads, but we do things like game night to where it's a little less schooly. Can I say that? Where it's really based around fun, where we can provide information and connection for parents, but then also allow the kids to be around each other and engage in some challenging games. Like, I think having events that aren't just like a discussion or a speaker, like kind of opening it up a little bit. Hopefully more families feel invited to participate. Alyssa, Maggie, I know it's a tough question, but do you have insight? Because I mean, if that to me even would be helpful when we are planning for things in the future.
So I'll do the SIMS, the ambassadors program that Sycamore has. GEAR tries to have a representative at all of those events. So that really, it's any new to the district people. And then, but specifically international students, that can be a really hard, they don't understand how the American school system works in general. And so then figuring out the subgroup of it can be really hard. And then GEAR also, all of our events are advertised everywhere to everyone. Every one of them says everyone's invited. You don't have to be a Sycamore GEAR member to attend them. And so just trying to kind of be aware of those differences. And then it is one of the places that we actually do pay attention to as how is our district doing for an equity piece. Is our gifted community representative of our school community? And when it isn't, what's going on there? What can be done? What do we need to do in order to try and make sure that our gifted program is again, representative? That's one of those ones that it's tricky. It's something a lot of school districts struggle with to really reach those kinds of things. But it's one of those places where then you go like, well, how can we do those enrichment activities for all students across all boards? And make sure that every child is given the chance to develop their giftedness, because just like the creativity, a lot of these kind of visual spatials are things that can be developed. And so a kid might just be right there on the cusp and they just need more opportunities in order to really get access, to get those test scores, to get them into the appropriate programs. I wouldn't say we're at all perfect about it. There's always room for improvement, but we do try and do the best that we can to kind of make sure that we're being as inclusive as we can, even within this subgroup of people.
Well, I know Leeds does that too. Everyone is invited. They do a really good job with that. And I was thinking at the district level, when we choose our sites to host, like our game night specifically, because that's definitely more of that 3-6 grade level draw. We choose not that we have a lot of neighborhood schools, but the ones that we know are easiestly accessed. Whether that by walking or, avenues that are just easier to get to, and have the largest draw for students we know that are most underrepresented. So our game night is specifically at a certain building because it's easier to access. So while that doesn't answer or fix all of the underrepresentation, it is a thought that goes into it that could help increase the connection and bring in parents and families that maybe wouldn't otherwise know about it or come. So,
and this is just from my putting on my I work for a nonprofit hat and do development and fundraising and things like that. And generally, like if you can think of somebody who is a parent who is part of one of those underrepresented populations, make an ask them and say, I thought of you and I think you would be good, because if you are connected to them enough to be able to do that, people are more likely to respond positively when they're asked personally, and when you point out to them why you think that they would be successful in a role. But it is a little bit of chicken and an egg situation, what comes first, because it's hard to get more of those diverse populations when they're not there. But then when you don't have them, there's no perfect answer.
We do have another question about any instances where being an organized parent group help achieve goals. I know, Maggie, you were talking specifically about like having a full-time district gifted coordinator. I know this year our kids took the PSAT during the school day. I know that probably doesn't seem like a big deal, but it was.
We've only been working on that for, I don't know, 8 years.
And that is solely because of leads in our conversations. So, I mean, I know those are two minor ones. Alyssa, Maggie, can you think of other times where instead of just that individual parent, like being able to change, were there other places that?
I would say kind of generally because we do a lot of education about, what is gifted. There's a lot of stereotypes out there in the world, like, they've got to be Bobby Fischer, kind of like they've got to be a chess genius. And it's like, gifted doesn't always look that extreme. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. But gifted isn't an ideal student in that a lot of them do struggle with executive functioning, even if they're not ADHD. So kind of, working to educate the population to kind of, these are the many shades of gifted, and this gifted doesn't look like just one thing, I think is very helpful to reach those kinds of goals too. So yeah, I would definitely say that, making sure that everybody kind of, because we will have people that are like, I don't even know what that means. And you're like, okay, well, let me tell you a little bit about it. That's a great one.
And I think it's nice from a perspective of other parents. Sometimes people are a little intimidated maybe to go to the district or go to the when they have questions. Like they might feel comfortable asking their teacher, but if they have more of a question about the system, so to speak, or things like that, having a group of people that is, says, well, ask us, we'll help you get you connection, we'll help facilitate those connections. And I think that's one other piece I wanted to point out with this is you don't have to know everything. You don't have to have all the answers to get started. You don't have to, have 10 years of experience of any of that. You have to be willing to say, I don't know, but I will check into that. Or I don't know, but let's try to figure this out together. That kind of thing. So
start with just good questions. That's it. And then you go from there. And to some extent, you'll be amazed at how much you do know and how many tips and tricks you can get from other parents. But then moving on from there, you do get into kind of the more logistical things and things like that. And there's value to that too. So it's all over the place. And it is a great, once you get the ball rolling, I do think it kind of, obviously these groups have perpetuated themselves over years and years and years and years. So, just go ahead and get started. And there is value. One parent can be dismissed. When you have a whole group of parents going, this is a concern, it just has a lot more weight. It just does. So it's it's great to get those things started.
I'll share one more because I'm super proud of it, but then also it's because Alyssa and our conversations, me being able to go to their executive board meetings has helped. But the one big ask was we keep math accelerating kids, which is wonderful for them. But then as juniors, they like math out. And so while we can send them to the CCP route for their senior year, some of that, it works for them, but a lot of them want to still have that typical senior year feel where they're in the building. And Leeds was advocating for like, we need something for these kids. And because of that, for the last 3 years, we've been able to offer a multivariable calc. We've gotten really lucky with having a UC math professor who's also one of our teachers. So we're lucky all around and being able to get that offered, but it wouldn't have been something that it would have occurred without having Alyssa and Leeds advocating for that change. So I know that it takes time, as Alyssa was, we were both laughing about, sometimes it takes a few years, Maggie, this too, but it is worthwhile and it does make a big difference at the district level too. So Well, I know we are out of time. If there are any other questions, let us know. We hope to connect with you in the future, and we hope you have a wonderful rest of OAGC Parent Day. Thanks for the opportunity to be with you today.